So today I want to talk a little bit about inline assistance in Z here. So basically selecting some code and then asking for a change. Like I could take this here, Control Enter, opens up a little prompt here. I could type something in like remove all the comments. And right now I'm using Llama 3.2, the 11 billion parameter model. This was just released. So anyways, I was test driving this the other day and I didn't think I would actually be able to do this without making some mistakes. But when I ran it, you can see here. All right, now you can see I get back a response. It's actually pretty fast once that response comes back. I've got the diff here of what's going to change. The red lines are what was there before, blue is there after. So if I hit return here, that accepts the changes. And an easy way to evaluate the performance of this is just to save the file here over at the command line. Then I can run a diff of the changes. And you can see right here, all of the red parts, those are removed, and those are all of the comments. So it did a really good job of getting rid of those. And one important thing here, it didn't get rid of the shebang at the top, which is a good thing because that's necessary to be able to run this script correctly. And so I was actually pleasantly surprised by this because up until this point in time, I was convinced that using the inline assistance feature was just moot when it comes to a local model, that it just wasn't possible to do that. And let me show you why that is here. So I'm going to come over to a different scenario here. I've got an empty bash script, just a file right now. I'm going to ask it, and I'm going to actually switch over to a different model here, something smaller. I'll go to the 3 billion parameter model for 3.2. So I'll ask it here to write me a bash Fibonacci function. I'll just hit return here, and I'll show you the issue that I was encountering previously. Actually, okay, that time I got lucky here. Let's try that again here. Let me rerun that. Okay, you can see the problem that I have is down here at the bottom this time. You see this inserted code token that's not supposed to be there. And most of the time when I'm using these smaller models, I found that those tokens are inserted either at the top or the bottom. And so if I want to use the output, I've got to go and get rid of those. Let me run this again here. And now in this case, you can see another problem here. At the start, I have some curly braces and at the end as well. And so I figured these small models just didn't understand what to do to actually make a change. And whatever they sent back wasn't following the format closely enough that it was just never really going to work well to be able to take a chunk of code and ask it to edit it, especially if you accept something like this here. And then maybe I fix some of this, get rid of that. And then let's just say I want to change something in here. Maybe I want to change this here. I'd like to collapse that down into one condition if possible. So I'll select that chunk of code here, Control Enter, make a change here. So can you simplify this to one condition? And in this case, you can see it's adding the curly braces as well as not even doing what I asked. It's not even making any changes. And if I regenerate this again here, see if we'll get lucky a second time. In that case, you can see now we've got the rewritten code token. So this is another problem as well. And so I had just given up on using this feature. I just figured it wasn't possible to get it to work well with these small, or I like to think of them as stupid models. And so I was pleasantly surprised by what the 11 billion parameter model could do. In fact, let's just test it here and see how it can do on this problem. Pick that one, and I'll rerun this again with the different model. And as you can see here, what surprised me is it wasn't putting those tokens in the placeholders, so there's no rewritten code in here. And as you can see here, it's doing what I asked. It's actually collapsing down the conditions into one less than or equal to check. So yesterday I started doing some testing, and along the way, I started to have the placeholder show up even with this bigger model, but it was rather infrequent. And so I dug into why that was. I wanted to submit an issue to Zed to see if there's anything we could do in terms of the prompt. And I realized when I took a look at the prompts, I'll show you what this looks like here. So here is the prompt as it is out of the box. And what I noticed here, if I zoom in, that token that kept showing up, it's actually a part of the prompt here. And when I was reading through this, basically this is the problematic part right here. So this part of the prompt sets up the format of the response. It's basically asking the model, whatever I've asked you to do in terms of rewriting the code or inserting code, I want you to then respond with this format where we've got 3 backticks like a markdown code block. And then we've got the placeholder for the new code or inserted code. And then we're trailing with 3 backticks as well. And so when I was reviewing this, I realized there's no definition of what this inserted code placeholder is. I just had to come to that conclusion after a while of reading it and trying things out. When it finally dawned on me, that's supposed to be a placeholder only. That's not actually supposed to be returned in the response. And so that's why I have a problem here, because if I'm confused by this, certainly the models are going to be confused, especially the smaller models. And so what I did is I lopped off this entire part of the prompt here. Let me show you what that looks like here. Now I'm asking it, please just start with your response right away. Add no remarks before nor after. Only give me the code to actually insert. And that's in the case of inserting a chunk of code. The other case is rewriting code. And down at the bottom here is that one. In that case, I'm just saying immediately start your response. No remarks, only the rewritten code. And let me show you what that prompt looked like for the rewritten side. So here's that rewritten code placeholder that showed up at least one time in those examples. And so again, I just lopped off this entire part, and you saw what I replaced it with. Once I did this, and let me move this file in place to do this. So there's a prompt overrides directory. You can see where that's at on disk, and your config directory Z and prompt overrides. Inside of here, if I move this file from fixed and just move it to content prompt HBS, once I do that, Z will pick up that change here. If you want to confirm that, you can look at the logs for Z, and you'll see it's reloading the prompt right here. So once I've done that, then let me undo this change here. And let's try it with the smaller model this time. All right, so can you simplify this to one condition? And again, I'm using the 3 billion parameter model now. All right, it came up with something. It's not doing what I asked, but it's also not adding those extra tokens or placeholders. And so I could, of course, accept this if I'd done something right, and I'd be a step closer to solving my problem. And of course, if I do this again just to see if I got lucky, run it again. In this case, it's not actually suggesting anything new, but it's also not throwing those stupid placeholders in. So let's run this again here. All right, that time it's adding a lot. It looks like it's rewriting the entire script. The important part is here, none of those placeholders are showing up anymore. In fact, it's generating valid code. Now, it may not be valid for what I've asked it to do. Nonetheless, it's code that may actually work if the model can actually achieve whatever it is I asked it to do. So now let's do this here. Let's ask it to start from scratch here and write a bash Fibonacci function. Let's see if we have any problems with what it spits out here. Okay, it looks great. Now, I haven't verified the implementation, but on a high level, this looks like it might actually work. It has no extra characters that's going to break anything. And let's do this now. Let's come down here to the 1 billion parameter model. This is a lot smaller. Let's regenerate this now. So this is definitely not correct. Nonetheless, it is actually code that could run. It doesn't have the placeholders and extra curly braces, so that's good. And if I do this again here, run it again. Okay, that looks like it might be more viable. I don't know, that looks like a lot for the task at hand. Of course, I could then switch over to something like the 11 billion parameter model. I should have better luck with this one. All right, so you can see it's even adding some logic here to perform some checks. And actually, what I want to do today is not to talk about the accuracy of any of these code samples that are generated. I just wanted to point out that with a small change to the prompt, it's possible now to actually try using these local models. Let's do something else here. So let's ask it specifically to give me the nth number. Otherwise, it might be confused about giving me the entire series. All right, so get something back. It looks like it may work. I don't know. We could always try it. Let's just see what happens here. So now I could come down to the bottom here. Let's just ask it here to come up with some test cases. Give me test cases 1 through 5. But that looks good enough in that case. Accept that then. Save that. Let's just see if this runs. Hey, that actually looks accurate. And that was after just a few simple prompts. And so really all I wanted to do today was show you, if you have that fix in place with the prompt, inline assistance can be just as viable as using something like completions here in code. And unlike completions where maybe you want to type in a comment to give it some guidance, instead of doing that now, you actually can just type that into a prompt. You don't have to set up some sort of weird comment. And so I think this makes inline assistance or transformations a much more viable tool to be using. So if you're interested in these updated prompts, here is the pull request that I set up. Hopefully they'll merge this, or better yet, it'd be good if somebody that created the original prompts could just take a look at it and make appropriate clarifications. Like maybe they want to stick with the markdown backticks. That would still work. In fact, that did work in my testing as well. By the way, I'm using OLlama to run these models locally. I've got the 11 billion parameter Llama 3.2 vision model, which surprisingly is really good at text as well. I've also got 3.2 with the 3 billion and 1 billion. These two are really fast. And then, of course, you could use any other model like 3.1, 8B. That's also a good one. or you can look at other families of models.